Hey, heroes and peakers, or whatever we're calling ourselves these days. Welcome back to another quick peek. It's been a while. 2022 came out here with the force. So far, so good. Knock on wood. I'm here to do another quick peek, and this time I have a different guest, a very, very esteemed colleague of mine, Mike. Mike, say what's up to the crew.
What's going on, guys? How's it going? Thanks for having me on. It's good to be here in a brand new year, and can't wait to let it go.
Looks like you're still working while you're making time for this pod. I
I'm
appreciate that.
trying to summon my inner and outer Tom Wamsgans today. That's really what I was.
Oh, perfect segue. With that being said, our topic today is about a show that I've been dying to talk about for a long time. And Mike and I have been talking about it offline, and that show is Succession on HBO. Quick little synopsis for those who may or may not have heard the show or casual have heard about it. Succession is an American drama TV series from HBO created by Jesse Armstrong. The show itself, this is my opinion, this is not in Vanity or any journal. I believe is loosely based on the Rupert Murdoch family and the empire that is a multimedia conglomeration. But however, the exact synopsis is the fact that this show centers on the Roy family, the dysfunctional owners of that Waystar company, Roy being the patriarch of that family. They're basically a global media and entertainment conglomerate, much similar to the former News Corp and Fox Enterprise. And in addition to the family, there's a lot of corporate struggles between takeovers and regime changes within the family structure and the C-level folks. So with that being said, the show itself premiered a couple years ago, June of 2018. The third season finale, which is the reason why we're here to talk about, aired December 12th of last year. And it's already been renewed for a fourth season. In fact, it was renewed the month prior to that in October. So this show, for those of us who watched the main podcast, was my number 2 show of 2021 TV show. And you'll hear a little bit why from Mike and I, why we love the show so much. So let's get to it. So Mike, the first thing I want to get into is, I do this a lot, is what would be the tweet length review of the finale? And I'll go first just to give you a flavor. My tweet length review of Succession Season 3 finale is in honor of another HBO superstar who passed away, Michael K. Williams, portrayed the character Omar. When you come at the king, you best not miss. That nugget, to me, it illustrates that entire finale, actually the entire season, but that specific finale for one particular character and everyone else surrounded by it. What about you?
I would say that power cannot be given or owed. It can only be taken. And the whole first 3 seasons have been each one of Logan Roy's kids, Kendall, Shiv, and Roman, having an opportunity and believing that they were going to be given the reins of this media empire. And then at the end of the season 3, the outsider, the somewhat self-made man, Tom, finds a way to make the ultimate power move and puts himself in position to take the reins instead of all 3 of the Roys who had their opportunities. And let's say they just didn't take advantage of them for one reason or another.
Great tweet length review. And there's a lot that you threw in there that I could marry with some other topics. Power taken. For example, you mentioned Tom, but there's other characters in this particular season that came. For example, Alexander Skarsgård's character, who played the tech giant, who kind of helped to start the machinations of getting Roy to not pass his legacy on to his kids, but the other people who really wanted the power. So that's part of that, your little lengthened review. So that being said, let's just go right into it. What would you think was your big overall takeaway of this season, and specifically this finale of this show?
Absolutely. So I think that when you look at the first 3 seasons, I think that each season kind of focused around one of the kids' opportunities to try and take over. So the first season, Kendall really had his opportunity. He was the heir with the flair. He had his real shot to take it. And then obviously, he had everything right there in his hands. And then because of his addiction issues, he fell apart and he couldn't get it done. The second season, really, Shiv, I think, had her opportunity to really kind of step up. But then she really kind of felt for one way or another that she couldn't take it. She, got trapped into kind of betraying Logan for a potential job with Rhea, the CEO. So, that kind of doomed her. And then in season 3, Roman, out of nowhere, really kind of stepped up and started becoming the guy. But obviously, there was one huge reason why he kind of failed at the end of it. But at the end of it, I really think the point was that none of the kids really had the abilities or the experience that their father had. And I think they both understood that and resented them for it. So Tom really kind of coming out and kind of being the kind of at the bottom of the totem pole for this entire organization for such a long time. He was looked down upon by everyone, including his wife. And I think that was really kind of the main dynamic in this season, was that Shiv had every opportunity to be there for Tom between his potential imprisonment, his career aspirations, and just listening to him. And she kind of scorned him one too many times. And that kind of, allowed him to make the decision that I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. But, it was fantastic.
That's a great takeaway. You actually stole my thunder. I was going to mention the underdog. My idea was the underdog. In the previous seasons, I forgot which season it was when they went back to where he grew up in Scotland, where Roy, played beautifully by Brian Cox, who I believe is actually Scottish. He kept telling the stories of what they came through and like the upcomings and the trappings they didn't have and how he made his empire. But then the show would juxtapose that with the kids being privileged. They were like, they came from money. They knew nothing of their dad's upbringing. They just knew what their dad was offering them growing up to school and the empire. And then you can see the strengths and the failures of each character based on the fact that they're privileged. For example, Shiv was brilliant when it came to like certain things. She was brilliant in maneuvering herself because of the fact that she went to certain Ivy League schools. She was in some social circles, so she knew certain political inclinations of certain people, and she was gifted in that. And they even showed that some in this season when it came to the presidential selection. Kendall, clearly the most business savvy of the three. You can say that if you had to take a shot and a gun to your head between the three, you would rely on Kendall. But also with the failings of him being so privileged, he was exposed to drug addiction and also exposed to not having accountability and responsibility. That came with his wife, his family, which they showed very stark in this season, how certain things about his family and kids he just didn't know because it was never that important to him. It was always about the company. Roman on steroids was the pure failure of being so privileged, but yet having enough cunning because he learned that from his father. He saw his father, how his father's done. In fact, he was the one always reminding them how there were certain situations that were similar to what their dad did in this scenario because he remembered that. So you could tell the fact that he was cultured in a society with his dad, that he knew certain experiences he can always draw to if he needed to in a pinch. But because of the failings of being so privileged, he never understood the consequences that would come with that. Yeah, sending dick pics around is all cute at the board table, but when it goes to the wrong person, it could jeopardize major deals. So that was my big takeaway of that, was the underdog, which is very similar to what you're saying of the three kids.
Yeah, well, it's funny too, because with Roman this season, it's weird because I would never say he had empathy because he didn't, but it does seem like he had the most human intelligence or emotional intelligence, I should say, out of the three. Because Kendall, to your point, seems like he had the vision, he had the corporate chops,
the business, the brains.
Shiv had the strategy side, but Roman was the one that could really kind of sit down with somebody and connect with them on a human level. Maybe not someone that he would consider to be a human, like a everyday person, but people that he wanted to get in touch with from a business perspective. He really kind of showed a talent that the other kids definitely didn't have. So it was interesting to see, to your point, all their successes and failures. And I think it goes back to what you said, is that growing up with the privileges that they had, it's possible for them to really kind of complete the picture and take this over the way that they all individually wanted to.
Yeah, so let's segue a little bit more into the show. I don't want to focus too much on the main characters of the show. The show at itself got a lot of accolades during the pandemic because many of us were forced to watch stuff streaming, and the blockbuster movies weren't around. So the casual fan who wouldn't be into like Billions or this show in particular, Succession, was hearing through word of mouth, hey, this shows something here, something about the plot, something about the actor, something about the cinematography. It feels like it's one of those big budget movies, but done in like piecemeal, little parts. So one thing I want to make sure we quickly focus on was this particular season, and how, for example, there's a segment or a portion, there's a couple of episodes where they're not even on in North America. They're somewhere in the Mediterranean. They're traveling from like Tuscany to freaking Sweden and whatnot, and they're going on location. It's a wedding event that's happening here. There's some camera angles. There's a lot of shots this goes out to cinematography, the crew, the score, because certain scenes to me resonate more because of the music playing in the background during that event, much like a big blockbuster Hollywood Marvel movie, So let's really dive into why we think this show, beyond just the characters and the acting, as a complete, production, really stands out among some of the best in television broadcasting right now.
Absolutely. I think obviously the first thing to talk about is obviously the writing of the show, which is spectacular. And I think that there's in my opinion, there's a lot of shows that have a great concept that maybe have a season's worth of good writing. And once a streaming service or a cable network gets a built-in audience, the writing can kind of go downhill, and then you're just kind of wearing it out after a while. What's
looking at you, Walking Dead, AMC.
Ted Lasso, even something like that. But for this show, it seems like it was really put together to fit a 4-season production schedule. It wasn't, hey, we've got an idea for this one season and let's just kind of adapt things as we go on. So it seems to really kind of be flowing through naturally, and really the twist in the finale really kind of brought that into the forefront. So it makes me very excited about season 4, which we can talk about. But I think beyond that, there's a couple of things. One is the cinematography is a very interesting style because there's a lot of handheld camera motion, which makes the viewer feel like they're in the room with the boys. So it really increases the personal feeling between these characters, and you really feel like you're on the inside. So for those of us that are not in the C-suite of a multi-billion-dollar organization, we don't know how those backroom conversations go, or really how the power plays happen. So with the way that the camera is really set up, you do feel like you're kind of a fly on the wall.
By the way, you and I, have been, because of our work industry, have been exposed to conference rooms and the setting. And to me, it felt like we were really in one of those rooms, because we actually, for our living, we actually take part in some of these rooms. And to me, that's beyond just writing and set design and director. That's like the show creator paying attention to detail, making it seem like you really are experiencing being in the boardroom of a major multimedia merger. So one thing I want to touch upon as briefly as possible was big moments of big scenes in either the series or the finale. And I'll keep it real brief. To me, there's just 2 standouts. One, they both involve the same character, 2 different pairings. One is Kendall Roy, played by excuse me?
Jeremy Strong.
Jeremy Strong, yes, thank you. Who I think might have gotten an award last year for the role, a Golden Globe. When he is basically like left at his lowest of low of this season, and he's just passed out on the little water tube in his pool. And then the first shot is when you're seeing it's still probably maybe 3 o'clock, where the sun is rising over this infinity pool that he's in. And then he's just passed out. He has a bottle of beer in his hand. And you see from the top angle at first, and you're wondering, is he just knocked out drunk? Then there's a submerged shot underneath in the water pointing upwards, where you see the bottom of the water tube and his head and face and the little bubbles from his mouth, because his face is partially submerged. You're thinking, did he just die? Is he dying? And then the music is playing. And that entire scene, to me, although it became a meme for a lot of other reasons, was one of the best moments of the entire season. And as far as best scene, that also involves Kendall Roy.
Yeah.
Was at the finale when he's sitting down with his dad and he's trying to come to a truce with his dad. And it's again going back to the privilege. He's doing it not in the conference room. He's doing it not in the bedroom. He's doing it over a lavish dinner set up with someone coming in, Italian chef. They're bringing food. While this is happening, the father, Roy's looking around and he's like, and he's thinking in his mind, am I supposed to eat this? Is this poison? So he calls for his grandson, Kendall's son, to come around and ask for, and I see it coming. It's not to say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How's everything going? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Taste this. Like, what level of depravity are you at where you feel like your son's trying to kill you, so you want your grandson to come taste the food first? That scene to me spelled so much about both characters in that scene, because you can see the incredulous look on Kendall's face, like, you kidding me? You think I would try to kill you? And then now you're bringing my son into this? That to me was, what about you?
I mean, that was an unbelievable scene. And it was, I didn't know how to feel about that when he brought the kid out. I mean, that was a lot, but I think it's same thing. And same thing with the pool scene where they just held on that submerged shot with the tragic music playing. It was fantastic. But I think the big one for me was the Nero and Sporus scene between Tom and Greg, where he tells him about Nero pushing his wife down the stairs and then castrating and marrying Sporus. And that was kind of the setup scene.
The setup for, Tom and Greg's selling your soul to the devil. Yeah, good point.
So I think that with Shiv one too many times just pushed all of his concerns aside and made it very clear that she put her own aspirations above whatever was happening with her husband, Tom. So once she made the mistake of not believing that Tom could ever betray her, she let it slip to him what their plan was. And at that moment, Tom really had enough, and he made the decision to betray his own wife and goes to Greg and says, listen, I need you to take a leap of faith with me. Let's do this together. And he agreed. And I think that's I think it perfectly is foreshadowing between the Nero and Sporus story with Shiv and with Greg, which was fantastic. So I love that one. And then the other Tom scene that I thought was great earlier on, which was probably during my favorite episode. I think the finale was my favorite. The other episode I really liked was when they're in Virginia trying to pick the next president, which was unbelievable for so many different reasons. But in the scene where Kendall is meeting Tom at the diner to try and recruit Tom to betray Logan and go to Kendall, that's the first time you get a sense that Tom really isn't just this pushover and he's got a bigger game, because at the end of it, he says, look, I don't see how I can betray you. And beyond that, I've seen you get fucked quite a bit.
He goes, I've always seen people come after him. He always wins.
And at that moment, he not only kind of, pokes holes in Kendall's theory about, once you betray Shiv, she'll respect you, which is a little bit of foreshadowing, but not the way Kendall was anticipating it. But then talks about how he knows that Logan is, somebody who always wins. And then even further back from that, Tom goes to Logan at one point and offers himself up to be the fall guy in case anything happens, which is a bold strategy, because if it doesn't pay off, then Tom could end up going to jail and then he's out. But because he offered to go to prison for Logan and then survived, he's in a perfect position that he proved loyalty to Logan, even though all of Logan's children have tried to backstab him at all these different spaces. So that's, to me, what really allowed Logan to trust him and allowed him to really leapfrog all the Roy children to take that top spot. It was pretty great, character arc for Tom.
Speaking of Tom, Greg, and the Roy children, I want to get to a quick little segment called My Top 3. Who won this season? Who won season 3? In no particular order, I'm just going to give you my top 3 and quick reasons why I think these 3 are my MVPs. One is Roy. It goes without saying. I mean, to me, he was a definition of succession. He succeeded himself. He was put in a situation early on where he had to divorce himself from the company because of governmental intrusions, and then he had to focus on who would take over. And then there was the possible purchase and acquisition, which then became a merger, which then became a takeover. So ultimately, he finagled it where he still would come out on top, one way, in one shape, form, or fashion, regardless. To me, that's the definition of Succession was within himself. Two, I would not say Tom. I would say Greg. I think Greg also won this season because Greg, although he did come from the same family, he's at the same stock as the Logans. He wasn't given the same exposure, the same connections that his cousins have. So I think Greg won this season as well. And then my final pick, and I'm sorry I was long-winded on this, is I'm not going to say Tom because Tom is a very obvious choice. I'm going to say the brief cameo by Alexander Skarsgård that plays Mattson, because he was like the guy off the bench who drops 50 in the game that you do not see coming.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be, what's his name? Adam Driver, who also showed up. The Oscar-winning guy who played the machinist. Another rich billionaire.
Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody showed up. I thought he was. I knew his name was pre-released for the casting. I thought he was going to be like a heavy hitter. He wasn't. Shania Layton, another person who played the lawyer in the beginning, flash in the pan. Right. But Skarsgård came in with a weird tech Elon Musk meets freaking Zuckerberg type of environment that I don't know was really working up until the last two episodes. All of a sudden you realize, okay, this character is got some punch in this character. And ultimately it was because of the fact that he reneged on the original deal and counter it was what started this entire upheaval within the Logan family empire and hierarchy. So those three won the season for me. What about you?
Well, for sure. And I completely agree with that. And I think beyond who you mentioned, I think the ones who won were actually the kid's mom, who was able to reopen the divorce settlement and get the flat in London and get a title for her new husband, just so she can give Logan the ability to basically box out the kids from having a supermajority on the board. So
good point.
Was able to win. That was pretty shrewd. And then Logan's current wife, who came back and basically negotiated a settlement for herself to make it look like they weren't estranged.
That's true.
Both of of Logan's wives did very well for themselves.
Very deep speech she gave to Shiv about the fact that she didn't really need to have the kids. Like she would rather not have the kids if she could go back in time.
Yeah, that was great. And that scene was shot, out in a square actually during the Euro 2020s. So they had to figure out a way to get rid of the people that are celebrating the Italian soccer team and get that scene and to have that level of emotion out of both those actors in such a precarious situation is unbelievable.
I did not know that. Wow.
But obviously I'm a big Tom guy, as you can tell throughout this whole thing. But beyond that, I couldn't agree with you more with Greg. And just to expand upon that, I think Greg's character development this season was fantastic for a couple different reasons. First off, he made a couple different ballsy moves. One was he actually told off Roman in front of the Contessa when Roman started to, bust his chops a little bit. He actually fought back at him, which I thought was pretty cool.
He manned up.
And then when Kendall tells him specifically not to date his assistant, and he does it anyway that night, I was just like, all right, Greg the Egg, getting it done.
Greg the Egg.
So I completely agree. I think those are definitely the ones that are going to win, and it's going to be interesting to see what turns out in season 4, where our winners end up, because
we'll get there. All right. So before we get to season 4 and where we go from here, obviously there's some winners. There's got to be some losers. Losers of this season and the finale. My low 3, Shiv. I think Shiv, as you mentioned before earlier, she was being transitioned in one of the earlier seasons, season 2, last season, as the possible Scion that will take over, because they started showing her ability to get through social circles and strategize was really good. And then season 3, once she started talking to, Tom about a lot of things were happening for her that I didn't like the fact that they went against her better judgment on pick the president, which is still a very powerful scene too. Despite, her judgment, they went against her. They went with the conservative pick, the neo-racist. And she stood there. She had to eat it, swallow it, took a picture, and you kept seeing her knock down to the point where the big Tom swing at the end kind of cut her down to her knees. So that's an L for her. Another L for her. Another L I have to give is to Roman, because Roman this season, much like Shiv last season, was being primed to take over. Because despite the failings of Shiv and Kendall, their pros I don't think was as strong as Roman when it came to I shouldn't say political, business skills and negotiating. That conversation he had with Mattson, played by Alexander Skarsgård, I thought was very brilliant, although it wound up not going the way he expected to. But he wouldn't even come to the table. He wouldn't have arrived at the table if it wasn't for Roman conversations he had with them. So, and then to see it flipped and to see him from the dick pic to the point where he's begging his dad, please, dad. And you see the face of McCulkin, the actor that plays Roman. You realize, wow, he really is just a child that always wanted to impress his dad. That's all it really comes down to, right? Mm-hmm. That's an L for him. And then lastly, my L, it's a hybrid L. It's going to Kendall, but not because of Kendall, the character, but because of the fact that Kendall failed to give us the Wu-Tang Clan rap session at his birthday party that he was promising.
Tiny Wu-Tang Clan, where are they?
Because we've seen him in season 1 when he did the rap song for his dad's birthday.
L to the OG.
L to the OGs. I thought they were going to be a actual Wu-Tang performers. Maybe you God, maybe some of the lower tier guys was going to show up. We didn't get that, so that's an L for Kendall, the character. So who gets your bottom three?
Well, I would say, at first, just to stay on that note, it would be great to see Tiny Golden Arms or somebody like that would be fantastic.
Golden Arms.
But I was going to give Kendall an L, but I decided not to, only because, not that I don't disagree that he we're led to believe that he almost takes his own life. So obviously he's at his wit's end, but I feel like the only moment of redemption for anyone in the entire show was in the season finale with Kendall telling his siblings about how he killed a kid, and they kind of brought them together. And, Kendall was already on the outs after the dinner with Logan, where he was saying that, buy me out, let me disappear. And then Logan decided to toy with him a little bit more. I feel like that moment was kind of his redemption. So I'm not going to give him the complete L. I do 100% agree with you, everything about Shiv and everything about Roman, because they completely had the rug pulled out from under them. They really both independently believed that they were going to be the choice to succeed Logan, and they were completely blindsided when that didn't go their way. The other two that I think are less significant, but definitely took the L, I'm going to say Frank and Carl in the executive suite, because those guys got completely screwed over. First off, Carl gets abducted with Roman in the last season, right?
Yeah.
They're in Turkey or wherever. On top of that, they even say in the board meeting, they're like, well, if they sell the Gojo, you guys are going to be out on your ass.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure Logan will look out for you. And they basically are kind of screwed. And same thing with Frank, who had been fired in the first episode, the pilot of the entire series. So, he's going to probably be on his way out unless we, see something happen in season 4. And I would throw Jerry into that mix, but Jerry has kind of been low-key navigating this temporary CEO position very adeptly. She warmed up to Roman, and when Roman thought he was kind of playing her, you kind of figure out maybe she's playing him a little bit. And even though she seems to be the shield, the human shield that Logan wants to use to blame everything on to kind of bring in the new CEO, I could see Jerry weathering that storm a little bit. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to her. But I would say beyond the ones that you said, I would say Carl and Frank have their work cut out for them. So, we'll see what happens to those.
By the way, I thought Jerry would follow suit with Carl and Frank up until the final episode where she was able to maneuver herself into that situation. And then again, going back to Roman, when he's pleading to her as well, what can she do? And she kind of regurgitated a line that she gave him earlier after the dick pic incident, and she was on the crucified to be crucified. That was tough. So she stayed out of the bottom three because of the final episode, and Roman he landed hard.
Yeah. It was like in Indiana Jones when he leaves and they say, don't trust anyone. And then later on, he gets double crossed. He's like, I told you not to trust anyone. I told
you. All right. So this quick peek is getting a little bit long in the tooth. Let's just get to it right now at the end. Where do you think season 4 is going? I'll start first and I'll give you the last. That's who we're out here. I think season 4 is going to now show how the Roy kids consolidate and kind of like return to form, but as a unified front with Kendall, Shiv, and Roman to try to overtake the new Waystar company, the mixture of Gojo and Waystar and their dad and Skarsgård's character. And I think that's where the show's ultimately going to lead us, was where the kids do take over, but not the way we thought it was going to happen. It's not one over the other two, and it's not with their dad. It's, in opposition of their father, to prove to them, you know what, this is what we really want. This is our legacy. We're going to, despite animosity against each other and our addictions to this and that and the third, we're going to, get ourselves together and we're going to, take over what's our legacy by force. Like you said, we're going to take over by force. And that's really interesting because, each of them have a strength and weakness that they're going to have to learn how to work like a team to overcome the opposition that they're in now. What about you?
So throughout this series, I think it's taught me that in this show, evil triumphs over good. And, in the last episode, you think that there's going to be this little moment where all three of the kids are getting along as a team and the show's going to switch from this dog-eat-dog world to siblings and teammates. And then boom, Tom stabs him in the back and takes it over.
So they weren't ready.
Of that, I'm just going to go back to the whole theme of Logan always wins. I'm going to say that evil triumphs again, and we all walk away from this thing thinking that good is going to win, or the perception of the good is going to win, but Logan is going to somehow always come on top like he always does, and it's going to be pretty riveting to see what happens.
All right. Great conclusion there. Great show. Highly recommended by Mike and myself. If you haven't seen it, if you have HBO Max, go back and watch season 1 and 2. I believe season 3 might already be available on HBO Max for those who do not have HBO as part of their TV package. With that being said, you can follow us, Heroes Peak, myself, at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even, Heroes Peak. And Mike, looking forward to have you here. Another one of our TV show recaps. You've been great. Appreciate your time. And good night, everyone.
Have a good one. Thanks for having me. Take care.